fantasy readers. This is Karyne Norton, your fellow book binger, and you are listening to the Finding Fantasy Reads podcast, where you can test out a new fantasy story every single week to find your next favorite author. Today's story is about friendship, magic, and adventures gone wrong. It's written by N.A. Walters, a fantasy novelist and avid reader who lives in Ohio with her 7 plants and 200 books. Because Nicole's a chemical and biomolecular engineer who has only ever witnessed one lab explosion, she prefers her fantasy seasoned with science, math, and a whole lot of magic. I'll be narrating today's story, but be sure to stick around to the end or check out today's show notes to see where you can find more from the author. For now, please enjoy the Linguisant's script by N.A. Walters. Kat studied the unfamiliar runes on the yellowed paper in front of her. 3 books full of the castle's personalized defense language lay spread on the buffed pine floor. "I know it's my fault we got caught," Seth said. Kat glanced up enough to see his leather boots pointed toward her, next to the broken cords that had bound their hands and feet a minute ago. "You're supposed to be watching the door." If anything would instill a sense of focus in that man, she'd think it would be being trapped in an enemy castle. "They're not coming back for us yet," Seth said. With his savant-enhanced senses, he could probably hear from there that the corridor was clear, but Kat worked better without someone watching her. As she scanned the runes, the language that anchored this room to the castle's code took shape in her brain. The unfamiliar patterns started to take on meaning, the way a language always did as she read it. If their captors had known a linguisant was in their grasp, they would have taken these books out of the room, even if a gap in their code would weaken their defenses. A weakened defense that she couldn't break would serve them better than an intact one she could crack in minutes. "You were right. I've been distracted." Seth scuffed his toe on the floor. "But I'm distracted because I know you're upset with me." "I don't want to argue right now." Kat flipped to a book with smooth white pages. She wondered if their code had drifted over the years. But gleaning stylistic differences in the language would require a much deeper understanding than what she'd get from 5 minutes of reading. "All we ever do anymore is argue. That's not true. Sure, we also ignore each other, avoid each other, and when we absolutely cannot do either in public, we occasionally make polite conversation." Kat snorted and glanced up at him. Seth's face brightened at her response, which should not have been that encouraging, then hardened as he steeled himself. Kat found her shoulders tensing before he even spoke. "You know I never meant to hurt you," Seth said. "I didn't want you to put yourself in danger chasing ghosts." Kat turned back to her books. In an instant, she was there again, sitting on the grassy bluff, squinting against the glare as the heavy sun sank to kiss the sea. Together, they were unstoppable, the perfect pair. They had so much in common. He an orphan, she abandoned. So she told him everything. Of being recruited by the Ret, of the intervening years of hits and heists, and of finally getting out. And Seth snitched. "Don't think about it." She pulled out the blank paper she kept hidden in her pocket and scratched out a few runes with her graphite stick to start a shield script. All script codes were location-sensitive. The language of the country influenced the mechanics in which runes worked. Defenders imposed secret defense codes over the natural language of the land to thwart a scripter who knew the algorithms. Within the castle's defenses, only scripts written in their code would function. When they got sufficiently far from these books, the standard regalic scripts stashed in her pocket would work again, and these new ones would not. "How many times are you going to make me apologize?" "He took me off the job." Kat glared at him. Seth's mouth hung open for a second. "Not every job, just that one. Look, it turned out okay, which is exactly what you wanted. You're not sorry. You're just sorry I'm upset. Seth spread his arms wide. I have apologized. I don't know what else to say. Perfect. Maybe you'll be quiet for once until you come up with something. Seth flinched. Kat looked back down at her paper, swallowing. She was about to take it back when at last Seth turned away. He paced around the small study that was their impromptu jail. Kat did her best to focus on the runes before her. After 2 circuits of the room, Seth climbed onto the desk. Kat glanced up. The slanted evening sunshine from the solitary window high on the wall hit him on the face. He perched on the edge, gazing out the window slit. He looked imposing there, much like an explorer on an outcropping of rock, overlooking miles of unexplored land. Not a captured spy peering out the only slit that allowed him a glance of freedom. Of course, Seth would never stand on such a cliff. He was terrified of heights. Kat shook her head and scratched out another rune. The forest is only a mile from the castle wall, Seth said, so we can go there when we escape. But then, what do you want to do? Go home? Call the job a wash? First, let's get out of here. No one is coming back yet. No one is on this floor, except a few rats. We have time to talk. And if they come back before I'm ready, then will you be glad you wasted my time? She glanced up in time to see his jaw twitch. Seth sprang down from the desk, graceful as the wind, and started pacing again. Kat finished the shield script and tore off that section of paper. After writing a nearly identical one for Seth's shield, she ripped it off and handed it to him. Here, test this. She began the runes for unlocking any door as Seth murmured the activation phrase for his shield. In the corner of her vision, he waved his hand through the air, testing that the shield took. As far as he could test it without a real opponent, anyway. To Kat, it just looked like he was flapping his arms around. Since he didn't say otherwise, it must have worked. When we leave this room, we'll go to the stairwell 3 doors to the left, Seth said. Kat scribbled out another rune. Since she needed to know this, she let him continue. Assuming the way is still clear, we'll head down 1 flight of stairs. That will put us on the 2nd floor, but many of those rooms have balconies. We can escape easier that way than through a main door. Can you make a weightless script? Probably. She'd need to do some more reading first. Are you sure that's what you want to do? They'd escaped out enough windows and balconies that he'd grown numb to it. Well, more numb. Kat didn't miss the way he steeled himself each time before he jumped. It's the best way. They'll be watching the doors. He bit his lip. She narrowed her eyes. It might be some misguided penance or attempt at toughness, but jumping off a balcony wouldn't hurt him, so she wouldn't press the issue. She finished the unlocking script, ripped it off, and dove into the weightless one. Once we're outside, Seth said, we'll make for the gates. I didn't see enough of the courtyard to make a good plan for how to escape. Maybe we can climb up the wall some distance away from the gate and the guards, and then run for the forest. Perfect. It was as good of a plan as any, and she needed to concentrate. Kat finished the weightless script, and then scribbled one she hoped she wouldn't have to use. A bomb. She ripped the bomb script from the remaining paper and put them in separate pockets. She fastened her script shield onto the leather bracelet that their captors were kind enough to ignore. They likely didn't know its purpose. The fact they thought simple rope bonds were sufficient made it clear they thought they caught a few ordinary spies, not 2 rare savants. She slid the unlocking script in an easy-to-reach pocket and rose. Here, the weightless script. She handed over the slip of paper. Despite everything, she wanted him as protected as possible. Seth tucked it away, holding out his other hand with the shield script. Kat tied it onto his bracelet, her skin tingling at the brief brushes of his arm against hers. He watched her with a steady gaze, eyes yearning. Kat turned away, unable to say the words he wanted to hear. I forgive you. She strode toward the door, but Seth stepped past her. He touched the oak panels with his fingertips and pressed his ear against it. He closed his eyes, concentrating his savant senses on the vibrations of the castle. He nodded and took half a step back. It's clear. He held out his hand for the unlocking script, and Kat handed it over. A kinesthont like Seth didn't have strong muscles or bones, but he did have enhanced balance and control. With focus, he could translate that into short bursts of increased power or speed. That was how he broke their bonds. He placed the script over the doorknob and whispered, "Unlock," in Regalic, their standard activation phrase. Thankfully, an activation phrase didn't have to be in the same language as the script. A faint click sounded on the other side of the door. Seth pocketed the paper and twisted the knob. He stuck his tongue between his teeth as he swung the door open and slipped into the corridor. Kat ducked out after him. Seth shook his head. An invisible alarm. Come on. Seth loped with the silent precision of a kinesthont, and Kat followed as quietly as she could, like a boulder sneaking after a rabbit. He started down the staircase. The landing midway between floors held a window they couldn't reach. Seth jerked to a stop on the last stair before the landing, and Kat slammed into him. He braced a hand against the wall to steady himself. Kat regained her footing and quieted her breaths. Someone is at the next landing, Seth whispered. Kat moved to step past him, but Seth put himself in front of her with infuriating ease. Ridiculously good balance and flawless reflexes did drastically improve one's quickness. She wrote the shield script and wanted to be the one to try it. If it failed, she should be the one it killed. But as she opened her mouth to say so, Seth said, "Shh." Unfortunately, now was not the time to have this argument, and Seth never yielded gracefully. Never. He held up 3 fingers and counted down. 3, 2, 1. When his last finger dropped, he sprang around the bend in the staircase. Kat turned the corner as he bounded down the second half of the stairs in 2 long yet noiseless leaps. Kat clambered down the steps after him. Seth activated his shield and was within reach by the time the guard at the entrance gasped and drew his short sword. The guard swung, but the steel stopped in the air, as if it hit toughened leather. Seth leapt back. The guard stumbled forward, and Seth pounced. As he always said, a fight was mostly about balance. He shoved the guard sideways with his shield. With one more firm push, he sent the guard tumbling down the next flight of stairs. Seth stepped out into the hallway. Second door on the right. Go. Guards ran toward them from both directions down the hallway. Kat sprinted for the door, and Seth's footsteps followed. She pushed the door open. It was unlocked. Seth slipped in behind her, and together they shoved the door shut. Seth leaned his shoulder against the door and slid the bar in place. Get something to use as a barricade. Kat scanned the room for something that would work. A balcony lined the far wall, like he expected. A desk with a wooden chair, plus a few heavier plush chairs furnished the room. The wooden chair would be the fastest fix, but it wouldn't last. Seth braced the door despite the bar. The door shook as something slammed into it from outside. Kat slipped her hand into Seth's pocket where he put the weightless script. He flinched as her hand brushed his thigh, separated only by a thin layer of trouser fabric. Her ears burned. She dashed to the desk while half her brain tried to assign a meaning to Seth's reaction. Focus. She dropped the script on the desk. I am sorry, Seth said. Kat froze, mouth open to activate the script. She took a breath and activated it. Not right now. When, Kat? He snapped, turning his head to face her. You've been shutting me out for weeks. When exactly will you deign to speak with me again? She pushed the weightless desk across the floor. You don't get to turn this on me. This is your fault. Something banged into the door again. She slid the desk in front of the door. Seth stepped to the side and leaned against the still weightless desk, frowning. Kat deactivated the script. Clever. He nodded to the desk, but he sounded depressed. Will you bring over a chair, too, to be safe? Kat grabbed the paper and crossed to one of the heavy chairs. I know, Seth said, his voice subdued. I know I messed up. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything, but I was worried, and I wanted you safe. You were my first real friend. My only friend. Kat spun on him, abandoning her task. And you were the only one I thought would understand. What if I went around telling everyone about your past, running for the gangs? It wasn't everyone, just Sephon. He already knows. I trusted you. I told you everything. I won't make that mistake again. Seth went as still as stone. Kat turned to the chair and activated the script. I get it, Seth said. It's all my fault, and you don't want me around anymore. I understand. I didn't say that. Kat pushed the chair up against the table. We really don't have time for this. We can talk when we're safe, okay? She already regretted the words. She had no desire to talk about this later, but she'd say anything to keep Seth's attention on escaping. Is there something I can do? Seth asked as they positioned the chair. Some way I can make this up to you? Kat deactivated the script. If not, Seth continued, if not, maybe we should stop being partners. Kat jerked upright. Her gaze snapped to his face, and her mouth opened. Seth watched her, desperate. She squeezed her eyes shut for a heartbeat and opened them again. Seth broke the tableau, grabbing the paper and crossing to the balcony. Kat forced her feet to follow. 6 guards clustered around the castle's main doors 1,000 feet to their left. Across the 500-foot-wide courtyard, a dozen more stood watch at the gate, half on the ground and half on top of the wall. A horn blasted outside in a pattern of long and short notes. Sunlight glinted on the guards' spears as they shifted, but they didn't leave their posts. No one had seen them yet. And the guards probably assumed the gate was their only way out. Kat suspected that they, Seth, would be climbing straight over the wall. She grabbed Seth's wrist and turned him toward her. We'll talk later, I promise. Seth nodded. Then he quirked a smile. We should probably be running for our lives. Kat chuckled. Seth grinned, a ray of genuine delight crossing his face. Kat's stomach twinged. She hadn't realized how much she missed that smile. He stepped up to the balcony railing, clutched it, and nodded. Kat hopped onto his back, wrapping her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist. He activated the weightless script with a whisper. Kat clung to him as he climbed over the railing. If she let go, she'd fall. But she squelched that thought. When she acted nervous, Seth got even more nervous, and he already hated this. Seth took a breath and dropped off the balcony. They floated downward. Seth landed nimbly and deactivated the script, right as a guard by the door yelled out. Run! Seth yelled. They took off across the courtyard toward the wall. The guards from the castle doors sprinted toward them. Seth and Kat would reach the wall first. Then they'd activate the weightless script and climb. The guards atop the wall ran toward them, evidently realizing they had no intention of using the gate. They'd beat the guards to the base of the wall, but Kat didn't think they would have time to reach the other side, and she didn't trust their shields to protect them from all of those spears. Time to do something drastic. I've got a bomb script, Kat panted as they closed in on the wall, like how Walter escaped the pirates. Seth jerked to a stop at the base of the wall. Walter broke his leg doing that. But he wasn't eaten by crocodiles. Don't worry, you're better than him. The color drained from his face. Apparently, jumping off a second-story balcony was different than letting yourself be blasted into the sky by an explosion. The guards drew nearer. They didn't have time for this. Maybe 30 seconds before the guards reached them. What was she thinking, shutting him out? She needed her partner at his full confidence. and that wasn't a script she could activate with a word. Seth, listen. She grabbed his arm. I need you, okay? You can do this. I believe in you. But we need to do this now. Seth met her gaze, abnormally still. Kat glanced toward the approaching guards. If they didn't do this, she was wasting whatever time they had to make another plan. Ready? Seth grimaced, but nodded. Kat pulled the bomb script out of her pocket. This time, she jumped onto Seth from the front. It might help him to have someone to hold onto, too. He wrapped his arms tight around her waist. He activated the weightless script and tucked it in his pocket. Ready, he said, which wasn't strictly necessary, since she felt the script take. Shield and jump in 5, 4, 3. She ripped the pin phrase off her bomb and threw it straight at Seth's feet. 2, 1. The bomb had a fuse time of 5 seconds. Seth activated his shield and jumped up, angling himself parallel to the ground above her. Kat's stomach flipped, and she tried not to squeal as they flew 15 feet up. Boom! The air shook, and this time Kat couldn't help but shriek as they hurtled upward. Wind rushed past them, and her ears popped. Seth made a panicked sound and shoved against her shoulders, pushing her away. That would not end well. Hang on to me. Calm down. She tried not to let her panic show. She clung tighter to his neck and kept her legs wrapped around his waist. If he managed to force them apart, she would fall. He stopped pushing and clutched a fistful of her shirt in his hand, breathing rapidly. You're fine. Don't hyperventilate on me. She needed to make sure they landed in the right place. Good job. Now close your eyes and hang on. Kat leaned away enough to see his white face and wide eyes staring downward. She hoped he wouldn't pass out. I'm not closing my eyes. Then hang on. I'm going to flip us over so I can see the ground. No, Seth protested, but she ignored him. Kat let go with one hand and pushed on the air as if swimming. Nearly weightless, this was enough to flip them over so she faced the ground with Seth under her. They weren't rising anymore, but drifting downward. Seth had jumped almost exactly straight up, but they were a little out past the wall. Below, a few guards were running for the gate to meet them wherever they landed. The guards were just getting moving. It probably took them a bit to figure out what happened. Kat estimated the guards would reach the place they'd land in 40 seconds. Seth's eyes were squeezed shut now. Kat winced. They were going to have to freefall. Anything else would take too long. They were high, at least a quarter mile in the air, but there was no time to exult in the height. We're not dropping fast enough, she said. We need to get to the ground so we can run. Otherwise, they'll be waiting for us when we reach the ground. Seth's eyes snapped open. He swallowed hard. I'll do it, Kat said. You just need to hang on. You can bury your face in my shoulder if you want. He didn't smile at her teasing. You put the paper in your left pocket, right? Seth nodded, still pale. Kat seized the script and brought it out in her fist. Turn so you're upright. She kept her legs wrapped around his waist, not wanting to get in the way of his balance as he tried to land. It took a bit of maneuvering to position themselves upright. All the while, Kat became increasingly focused on the press of Seth's body against hers. The falling process didn't usually take quite this long. Ready? She asked. 30 seconds. A sound something like a grunt escaped his lips as he nodded once. This was the quietest he'd been in his life. Breathe. She couldn't waste any more time. She deactivated the script. Seth cried out as gravity yanked them down. He clung to Kat tighter than ever as they hurtled toward the ground, wind rushing in their ears. When they reached the top of the wall, Kat activated the script again. They jerked upward, as if by a parachute. Seth grunted, and Kat pulled back to make sure he was watching. He was, but his eyes were wide and jaw locked tight. They weren't decelerating as fast as Kat expected. Still, weightless, hitting the ground at a somewhat high speed shouldn't be too difficult for a kinesthont. She hoped. She closed her mouth as the ground rushed up to meet them. Seth bent his knees as they landed, but stumbled. Kat put her feet down and her grip on him slipped. Seth fell back into the grass as his normal weight returned. Okay? Kat deactivated the script and reached her hand out. Seth seized her arm and yanked her down. A spear zipped past her ear and buried itself in the ground a few feet away. Seth rolled Kat off him and grabbed the spear as he sprang to his feet. Kat's legs shook as she stood. The fastest guard, now unarmed, was almost on them. Kat reached into her hidden pocket for the strengthening script in standard regalic she kept on hand, and ran with Seth at her flank. She tried to activate the script, but they were too close to the castle's code. Her feet pounded on the patchy grass. She focused her gaze on the line of trees a mile ahead, trusting Seth to guard their backs. After 10 breaths, she tried the script again. It took, and her feet flew faster beneath her. Kat looked over her shoulder. Seth still held the spear and nodded as he matched her pace. He must have gotten his strengthening script at some point, too. The distance between them and the guards grew as they closed in on the trees. An hour later, Kat sat facing Seth on the damp ground as the sparse forest darkened into a purple black. Only the treetops still held a ruddy cast where they could see the sun. They didn't plan to sleep. They couldn't afford to let the enemy guards catch up. But they needed rest. Then they'd walk on through the night, as quickly as possible in the dark. At least the forest was thin enough that some moonlight might sneak through. Heavy silence surrounded them, aside from the occasional crunch of squirrels on leaves. Seth was the first to break it. We should have planned our escape to include ransacking the kitchens. His hand rested on his stomach. Kat smiled a little. They passed plenty of streams to stay hydrated on their run, but they hadn't eaten anything since before they got captured. We should reach the river by daybreak, Seth said, and then we can find a boat to take us across. Kat watched him. Seth tended to think out loud, but when he started stating the obvious, it meant he was uncomfortable. Thanks for going along with my plan. She wanted to tell him she was proud of him, but she wasn't sure how to do it without sounding patronizing. After a beat of silence, he said, You didn't give me much choice. Kat winced. Was that an accusation, or was he trying to downplay it? In the fading light, she couldn't read his expression. A cool breeze cut through the trees. She shivered. Seth watched her from where he sat 3 feet away. An uncrossable distance. He'd always been the bold one. She rolled onto her knees and scooted closer. Still facing him, she sat beside his knee, cross-legged like he was, so their thighs touched. A warmth radiated from his leg. She took a hesitant breath. I'm sorry if it felt like I forced you into that. I didn't see another way. Seth shrugged, uncharacteristically quiet. He looked down at his lap. What? She bent closer. He swallowed. This isn't what I want to talk about. Kat stiffened, instinctively raising the walls she wanted to break down. Seth glanced at her. In the light that fell on his face, he looked guarded. How long until he forced on a skin so thick he couldn't feel through it, even with his kinesthont skills? Seth pressed his thigh against hers. I shouldn't have told him, but I was trying to help, and I'm sorry. Kat took hold of his arm, running her finger along the inside of the leather cord on his wrist. It was a desperate concession. No words were coming, but she didn't want him to give up. I'm not good at having friends, but I want to fix this, he said. I'd jump off a castle tower for you. Kat gave a surprised breath of laughter. She looked into his eyes, shining in the dim light. You did one better than that today. Seth snorted. All I had to do was not pass out. You did everything. You jumped and put your shield up, and you caught us. And you trusted me. How did they revert to talking about today again? It was so much easier. Kat swallowed. I forgive you. She wasn't sure she meant it fully. Not yet. I'm not saying this is going to be perfect from here on out, but I'm going to try. Seth flushed with sudden emotion and looked away. Thank you. And I'm sorry I've been stubborn. I don't want to hurt you either. It's okay, he said, his voice tight. He stared at an apparently interesting root. Was he going to cry? She'd been expecting elation, not this. Of course I want you around. I do trust you. I don't want any partner besides you. You're my best friend. He let out a shaky breath. Good. He glanced at her, mortified when he realized what he said. I mean, you're my best friend, too. A slow smile crept onto her lips. Good. We should probably be running for our lives again. Seth stood and held out his hand, grinning. Kat took it, and he pulled her to her feet. I hope you enjoyed listening to The Linguisant's script by N.A. Walters, narrated by Karyne Norton. If you want to read more by Nicole, go to nawalters.com to see what she's working on next. You can also grab a free ebook copy of the story you just heard today by signing up for her newsletter. Speaking of newsletters, the Finding Fantasy Reads newsletter gets sent out every Tuesday to remind you of new episodes. But I also give you updates on what I'm up to and how to find more from our featured authors, and any other books and deals I think you'll like. You can sign up for that at findingfantasyreads.com/newsletter, and also get a free bonus blooper episode. As always, I will have links for all those sites in the show notes. Thank you all for listening, and happy reading.